Ukraine is receiving a real surge of support from its Western partners. The United Kingdom and Germany are deploying the latest weaponry to strengthen air defense. The Ukrainian sky is now under reliable protection. All the occupiers' criminal plans are being shattered to pieces.
Russia is ramping up strikes on Ukraine's energy system and changing its attack tactics. Moscow is launching hundreds of drones capable of penetrating air defense systems and equipped with cameras featuring enhanced targeting.
Russia has turned strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure into a systematic operation aimed not just at temporarily damaging the grids, but at destroying the viability of large areas of the country. On the eve of winter, the goal of the attacks is to deprive regions of heat and electricity, undermine industry, provoke mass emigration, and create political pressure on Kyiv, writes The Economist. In
these conditions, air defense becomes critically important. But this year, Western partners are acting proactively, strengthening Ukraine's skies and energy system before the cold sets in.
We are not just now starting preparations for this winter season. We began preparations back at the end of the previous winter season.
As early as November, the UK will begin mass production of Ukrainian air defense drones. This is the essence of the joint project between Kyiv and London, designed for the rapid protection of the skies from enemy drones and missiles.
our Ukrainian friends will share their technologies and intellectual property with the UK, and in turn, we will further develop them and produce them on a large scale so that we can supply Ukraine with thousands of Interceptor drones every month, said El Karnes, the UK's Deputy Secretary of State for the Armed Forces in Parliament.
These drones will become part of a system called the Air Shield. It will integrate Western air defense systems such as Patriot, Airstream, NASAMS, as well as new mobile installations. These are being provided to Ukraine by Germany and other allies before the start of winter. The first drones will be tested by Ukrainian military personnel. If the tests are successful, production will be expanded, and some of the drones will likely be manufactured directly in Ukraine. At the same time, the UK authorities are expanding their multi-purpose missile production program. It is planned to deliver 5,000 units of this weapon to Ukraine to strengthen its air defense. We
are also announcing an expansion of the production program in the UK to provide Ukraine with 5,000 new multi-purpose missiles. This will create new jobs in Belfast and other cities, as well as strengthen Ukraine's air defense for the coming winter.
At the same time, European allies are increasing their support for Ukraine's energy sector. Germany and other NATO countries are mobilizing resources, from air defense missiles to support for the energy sector, so that Ukraine can withstand the winter and not succumb to attacks on critical infrastructure.
Germany has already paid 390 million euros with another 30 million. We agreed on this in the summer, but today I want to announce that we will invest an additional 30 million. Thus, we are providing 450 million euros. This money will make it possible to acquire the necessary technical equipment to save Ukraine.
In addition, EU countries are preparing a winter support package. To the already provided 3 billion euros, a new guarantee of 800 million has been added for the emergency purchase of gas. This was reported by the EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katarina Maternova. The aid covers the repair of power grids and the supply of generators and transformers. We
have also provided and continue to provide a lot of assistance in the energy sector, not only generators for people and businesses, but also transformer and compressor stations to help restore power grids, gas distribution networks, and compressors that supply gas from storage facilities which have been distributed. We also provide financial support to state enterprises and major energy companies for the repair of their equipment. We also supply more than 2 gigawatts of electricity per day.
Thus, support for Ukraine this winter is reaching a new level, from modern air defense systems to reliable energy supply. And whatever the Kremlin may be planning, Ukraine, together with its allies, is striving not just for tactical success, but for a strategic one, to withstand the cold, to preserve strength, and to maintain the ability to defend itself.
The front is ablaze. The armed forces of Ukraine have driven the enemy hordes into a deadly trap. Pokrovsk and Kupyansk have become hellish traps with no way out. The enemy's offensive has stalled. Kremlin soldiers are either stuck in place or fleeing without looking back. Fiery traps are snapping shut one after another. The Kremlin is in shock. Putin's carefully constructed plans are falling apart, and propaganda can no longer keep up with inventing new myths.
Ukraine is once again in the occupiers' crosshairs. The Russians launched a massive attack with missiles and drones. Tensions are also rising at the front. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction, where the intensity of fighting is high. A large number of occupiers are concentrated there. The Russians are trying to gain a foothold by any means necessary.
The main tactic of Russian small assault groups is to attempt to create an operational encirclement of Ukraine's defense forces directly in Pokrovsk itself. At the moment, the actual line of contact is at the key defense points of Ukraine's defense forces, the so-called CTD. Despite the extremely difficult situation, Ukraine's defense forces are carrying out successful counteroffensive actions. And at the moment, the area under the control of Ukraine's defense forces has increased to 200 square kilometers.
Fierce fighting continues in the Kupyansk-Kharkiv region. The occupiers are trying to gain a foothold in the northern part of the city. However, there is no talk of any encirclement of Ukrainian troops. The situation in Minohrad and its surroundings is also fully controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine.
At the moment, the main efforts of the occupiers are not aimed at blocking the Ukrainian defense forces, not directly in Kupyansk, but rather at the possibility of breaking through to the Kupyansk rail yard. The occupiers need control over this key railway station in order to use the short logistics route to the territory of the Russian Federation, and from the territories of the occupied districts of Luhansk region, to form a strike group whose goal will be to advance along the Oskil River towards Sloviansk and the Kramatorsk agglomeration.
Meanwhile, Putin has come out with a new scare tactic. The bunker dweller continues to talk about the successful tests of Russia's so-called wonder weapon.
These are the Poseidon unmanned underwater vehicles.
They also have a nuclear power plant.
For the very first time, we managed not only to successfully launch it from the carrier submarine, using the starting engine as planned, but also, importantly, to activate the nuclear power unit.
However, Putin did not provide any evidence, details of the tests, location, route, duration, or any other specifics.
Not according to the rules, not according to the rules. Petrol. Not in serial production, not put on combat duty. Therefore, there is not the slightest basis for talking about any threat from these mythological Russian Wunderwaffes to the NATO bloc or the United States itself.
But despite this, the alcohol president Medvedev called Poseidon a doomsday weapon and at the same time threatened Belgium with a nuclear strike. Let us recall the Belgian Minister of Defense stated that if Russia strikes the country's capital, NATO member states will level Moscow to the ground.
This is nothing more than an information ploy to which Western allies have stopped reacting. And the reaction of the Russian Federation's ambassador to Belgium to the statement by that country's defense minister is quite telling, as it demonstrates complete confusion and unpreparedness for such a tough statement from one of the members of the NATO bloc.
Against the backdrop of the Kremlin dictator's loud statements, Donald Trump has moved to action. The American president has instructed the Pentagon to resume nuclear weapons testing.
On the nuclear weapons tests of the United States. This is a tough military response from the country and President Trump to such information attacks from the Russian Federation. Moreover, Trump very firmly stated that the United States possesses the world's leading nuclear capability. Russia is in second place and China is conditionally third.
At the same time, the US has begun a large-scale reduction of its military presence in Eastern Europe.
On the one hand, while announcing such plans during the rotation period, let me emphasize again, the United States is increasing its nuclear presence in European countries. Let me emphasize again, this includes the redeployment of the nuclear arsenal to the United Kingdom, the redeployment of nuclear submarines, and the presence of an American aircraft carrier in the territorial waters of Daki. In other words, all of this actually points to a strengthening of the US military presence near the immediate borders of the Russian Federation.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A scandal that made even the walls of the Kremlin tremble. The entire power vertical is in an erotic frenzy under the glitter of medals and speeches about spiritual values, with champagne flowing and the lewd amusements of aging officials. Even the main Russian pervert himself regularly makes use of the paid services of ladies of the night. Don't believe it? See for yourself.
The double standard of family values in Putin's Russia. This is only at the microphone, under the spotlight, in front of the cameras of their tame propagandists. The Kremlin's master and his entourage preach about high morals.
Family values remain truly unshakable and deeply important for us, for Russia, and for all of its citizens.
I would like to express my gratitude to you on behalf of the Russian Orthodox Church and personally from myself for your unwavering attention to the spiritual life of the people.
We don't need foreign values imposed on us. Did you destroy your own? Let's see how all this ends.
For the entire Russian society, roads are extremely important. Traditional family values.
Behind the scenes, everything is completely different. In the best KGB traditions, they set up honey traps for their enemies. Meanwhile, they themselves have fun with women of low social responsibility, or simply put, escorts. And we can only guess at the scale and methods preferred by these elderly perverts. I
do everything so that I can be divided. I love it. Thank you, thank you.
Amazingly, the country's chief moralist came to power through a high-profile sex scandal in the 90s. At that time, Vladimir Putin was investigating the case of Prosecutor General Yuri Skuratov. Footage of him with 2 escorts was broadcast on the Central Channel News across the vast country. The authors of the book, The Tsar in Person, claimed that the revenge against the law enforcement officer who had started investigating theft in the Kremlin was orchestrated by a young FSB colonel.
The whole point is that it was Yeltsin himself who was behind the attack on Skuratov. And the person appointed to carry out this dirty mission was another visitor to the presidential chamber, FSB Director Vladimir Putin. At the beginning of 1999, the parliament controlled by the Yevras refused to dismiss Skuratov. That's when Putin and the women who entertained the man resembling the prosecutor general in a safe house in central Moscow were brought into the case.
Today, FSB Director Vladimir Putin told journalists that the scandalous videotape showing a man resembling Skuratov is genuine. In other words, it is indeed the prosecutor general who is filmed on it.
My opinion on this matter is well known. It coincides with the opinion of the president and the prime minister of the country. Yuri Ilyich must resign.
According to Navalny's team, this case became the trigger. The KGB practice from the Cold War era of setting up honey traps, in other words, sending women to seduce the right people, has been actively adopted by Russian officials against their own domestic opponents.
I realized that I had fallen into that very honey trap I'd only ever heard about in movies until now.
And as for Limonov, I think he even benefited, 67 years old and with a young woman.
While Putin's own inner circle, and this despite the fact that the true lives of the oligarchs are kept under lock and key, are not averse to having fun with prostitutes. And the younger they are, the better. To the delight of Russian investigative journalists, some of them, for example, Nastya Rybka, even wrote an entire book about her escapades. And based on the numerous videos she published, Navalny, who was still alive at the time, was able to determine when, where, and with whom the girl and her friends had their fun. This is how it became known not only about the escort girl's connection with Putin's favorite oligarch Deripaska, but also with Sergei Eduardovich.
This is Sergei Eduardovich Prikhotko, Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation. Prikhotko is not widely known, but he is an extremely influential Russian official who has spent his entire life working in public service. In the late 1990s, he worked as the deputy head of the presidential administration. At that time, the first deputy head was, by the way, Putin was an advisor to President Yeltsin, then to President Putin, then to President Medvedev, and to this day, he heads the government apparatus and serves as Medvedev's deputy. Prikhotko is considered a specialist in international relations and is regarded as perhaps the most influential official in this field. Not Lavrov, but specifically Prikhotko.
Rybka even wrote in her book that in terms of status, Sergei Eduardovich is above Deripaska.
Ruslan backs down before him. He never argues with him, always listens to him. And Dad is the only one Ruslan never jokes with. Who is this person? Who could a billionaire be afraid of? It was Dad who was dressed as a border guard at the very beginning. The border guard is in charge of the billionaire, and the billionaire can't get a word in when Dad brazenly flirts with his woman. What is this? I'm puzzled. Dad disappeared back on the deck. Such a mysterious figure. It seems that Dad was taken away before the yacht even docked at the shore. As I understood it, he couldn't even go ashore with Ruslan, for some strange reason.
Well, after this story with all its real details stirred up the media, the girl admitted that there wasn't just one escort girl in Prikhotko's bed.
She wanted something from Prikhotko, and she understood that basically she needed to get it through sleeping with him. Well, honestly, that's what all the girls in Moscow do, so why keep going to the movies with him?
So was Ksyusha the only one who went for Prikhotko?
Why only Ksyusha? Let's put it this way, everyone understands that people of a certain status and wealth, even if you don't know who they are, I honestly regret that I didn't sleep with Prikodko.
But the departure from traditional values, even though back then in Russia people weren't making such a fuss about them, didn't affect either the presidential administration official or the oligarch in any way. Moreover, not so long ago, journalists uncovered yet another of Deripaska's preferences: intimacy with underage virgins. And since there weren't many of those around, the pimps resorted to tricks.
They regularly performed a procedure they called refueling. The girls, schoolgirls, including the main one, Lisa Popova, who is the key figure, were also given it. Sometimes it was a packet, sometimes it was a special syringe. Before sex, they would inject it into the vagina, and at the moment of contact with Pupina, there was a red liquid there. It would leak onto the sheets, and the girl would pretend that she was in pain. She was taught what to say. The scouts, including Titova, did this. All of this is in the testimonies, in the case materials. And the victims also told us about this, that they were taught to act like virgins, to show blood and so on. Sometimes they were also given special substances, pills or burnt alum. These are also inserted into the vagina. They constrict it to imitate virginity. And this is quite a painful barrier. There are many conversations in the case materials where the girls talk about it, complain to the engineer about how much it hurts, how bad they feel, and they're told, just endure it, it'll pass, it's not a big deal.
Deripaska's perversion, which borders on criminality, is intertwined with prostitutes employed by Rosneft, the presence of elite prostitutes at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. The immorality of the Russian elite is seeping out from every crack. Yet at the same time, without batting an eye, they convince Russians that the most important thing is upholding traditional family values.
That's all for now. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to the next episode.